So, hello, fellow creatives. I'm just showing you my coloring book collection today because I love seeing other people's collections. I think we are all drawn to certain artists, but even then, we don't necessarily buy their entire collected works. And I'm just interested to know from people, why do you like a certain artist and what draws you to certain titles as opposed to others? Why do you skip others? What's the paper quality like within your collection? What media do you use, obviously based on the paper quality within your collection? And what style of art do you like? I think when people talk about adult coloring, the first thing that comes to mind for lay people who obviously don't engage in this hobby is things like mandalas. So I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think it's lovely, but mandalas do tend to be a bit flat. So when you combine nature illustration with mandalas, it sort of flattens it and makes the reality of shading a lot more difficult to conceptualize, at least for me. You can very much make mandalas pop, but so I enjoy something that's illustrative but not flat, if that makes any sense. You'll maybe see that as we flip through my collection. So some of them I've colored in, some of them I haven't. This architecture unfurled I bought today, so I haven't. But it takes architecture from various parts of the world, and you can obviously see that things are simplified visually so that there is an understanding from the viewer where we are. Obviously, the Great Wall of China is not exactly next to your skyscrapers. And I think people might find this to be reductive to the point of being insulting. It depends on who you ask. For me, I'm not too bothered, but again, that's because I'm not really an architect, I suppose. And one could also ask, why were certain locations and localities chosen as opposed to others? That's also a very politicized consideration, but again, this really doesn't worry me. I'm just enjoying the journey. However, with this unfurled series, so obviously when they say unfurled, they mean it opens up like this. There's a fashion unfurled as well, and I was a bit bothered by how reductive it was. It would take Native American fashion, one headdress and one outfit, and that was about it. And with Indian fashion, the same thing, one sari, but essentially a bridal sari, and that's it. And I do find that to be quite reductive. So as you move through the provinces of India, you obviously get a huge textile variation, but also within the decades as well. Fashion does change within India. It's not necessarily a very static thing. We well, I say we, but in India, you draw upon tradition and modernity at the same time. Obviously, I'm South African Indian, so it is different. I draw upon African elements as well. But yeah, I found the fashion unfurled to be too reductive for my taste, but this was just fine. And Gardens unfurled as well was just fine. Didn't really bother me. So, Angel Numbers Coloring by Anjali Singh. This one I will say the paper quality in Architecture and Gardens Unfurled is very thick. You can use things like markers, watercolors and paints would do just fine on this. However, Angel Numbers, the paper is very thin. So, it's not just going to restrict you in terms of the coloring utensils that you use, but also the layering possibilities, because again the paper is just so thin. It doesn't have, as some artists would say, the tooth to it where it can take layering. So I think it's beautiful, it's illustrative but not flat. However, the paper quality is a bit of a limiting factor with this one. Game of Thrones. So I'm a little bit of a heathen here where I haven't watched the series and I've read only one book. But I think for me, that's part of the excitement with this book because I'm not limited by the color palettes that were chosen within the show. I'm not limited by what I think of the character personally or how it was described in the books. If I do read a little bit more about Game of Thrones, I'll do it through the books and not necessarily through the HBO series because just from what people have told me, it tends to be very graphic on the violence and the sex, very gratuitous. And I don't necessarily need that within my media. It's not really what I'm looking for. In something like fantasy, there has been quite a lot of debate with readers where fantasy authors are very limited in their imaginations. They just take medieval England plus dragons and that's it. When there was a call for diversity, then they thought, okay, medieval England plus dragons plus one black or brown face. And I just think that is equally reductive. I think it's a lack of imagination, which is worrying within a genre which is based upon imagination. When you look at Something like Dungeons and Dragons does have beautiful lore, lore, and as does Tolkien. Tolkien is known as the father of modern fantasy, and he studied the classics in great detail, and that's what he represented within his books. It was not just medieval England plus dragons. It simply was not. Tolkien was very quintessentially English, but it came from a genuine research and curiosity and love of history. So I think the fantasy genre can go into drawing upon Japanese storytelling and Chinese storytelling, which I see a lot of authors doing now, and it's fantastic. It leads to beautiful, beautiful stories that are actually irreplaceable. It's the similar thing where Africa also has a rich oral tradition, and that's just something that we'd love to see a lot more within fantasy as readers, and which we are seeing, which I think is so wonderful. So, yeah, anyway, this coloring book is stunning. And George R.R. Martin, from what I have read of Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, is, he also does have this genuine care for what he's doing. And I think it's also shown in the pace of his writing. I think he has said explicitly, look, I do things at the pace that they can be done, why rush one's life's work, one's masterpiece? As you can see, gardens unfurled. So this is similar to that architecture unfurled, but I'm not going to show you as much of this because I have done skies and things like that here. So this is Gardens of the World, where it takes you through Morocco, Versailles. Yeah, I'm not going to show you my works in progress there. But I also think that this is quite stunning. And look, visually, certain things are condensed and summarized. So again, people might consider this to be reductive, but for me, it was not a concern. I enjoyed it, and I thought the shading that you can do with the dawn and dusk and that sky and how it spills the light over onto the plants, I just think it's stunning. The potential of this book. This one you might know very well actually because color talk has become quite trendy recently. Initially, when adult coloring came onto the scene, it was all about mandalas, which didn't really catch me. And then Kirby Rosanes came onto the scene early when coloring became popular. That was approximately 2017, which you will see some Kirby Rosanes there. But this one, Coco Wayo Girl Moments, I thought some of these cozy coloring are the line thickness is again a bit too thick for me in some of these books, and the images are a little too simple for me in some of them. Some people say that is the appeal because adult coloring has essentially become way too stressful, and having these very simple lines means you as an artist have a lot of freedom. You can do what you want. You can add complexity, you can add color, light, shading, or you can just keep it very simple, and that's totally up to you. So I found that this book specifically was a very good balance between having something going on within the image, so not so simplistic, but not too complex either. And some of them that I have flagged for myself have a light source. So here we've got a lamp as a light source, and so it's a wonderful way as an artist to really explore that. And here we've got a light source with her laptop, to explore light and shading, and which again, it's totally up to you. If you don't want to do that, you can do something where it's a 2 marker challenge, or whatever you want to do with your coloring journey, I would say is wonderful. If you're being creative, if you're having fun, if you're unwinding, wonderful. Goal is met. So this one as well, I don't know that I'm going to flip through much of this because again, I've got half finished art things everywhere. Just by flipping through, you can see that things are colored. But I love, so this is Mythographic, obviously, Cosmic Spirit by Fabiana Atanasio. And I love this because it's elements of tarot, elements of the zodiac system as well. But Fabiana is not reductive, it's not the same sort of imagery that you see everywhere else. It's celestial, it's magical, it's beautiful, and I just love her artwork in this specific instance. I've looked at some of the other Mythographic series, I've looked at her other artworks within the Mythographic series. Some things draw me, some things don't, but I really enjoy this one. Circle of Life by Melpomene Chatsipanagiotu. She's done quite a few others. So there's Enchanted Earth, there's a fair amount. This one, I think, again, I can't really tell you why I bought this one and I haven't bought any of her others yet. I suppose I haven't gotten around to it. One of them did look a little bit too much for me, like a lot of detail. But again, I might change my mind later and just buy it, honestly, because I have been known to do that. Where at one stage in my art journey, I'll say, oh, this is too detailed. I might get too bogged down. It would feel overwhelming for me. But a couple years later, I would say, oh, no, I enjoy the challenge. So that's where I am with Circle of Light. I've done various media here. Something like paint actually managed fairly well, so I used acrylic, whereas markers, some of them have bled through, I will say, but that's okay. Look, it's okay. We buy the books to use them. Metamorphia. I mean, I bought this ages ago. I honestly don't even remember what's in here, but I don't want to open it because it's very, very unfinished. Kirby Rosales was the first coloring book artist where I felt this is someone whose art I can get behind. This is someone who I quite enjoy. It's not mandalas, it's not quite as flattened, whereas it's not hyper realistic either. So when he first started, it was these not hyper realistic but realistic animals and then some doodle elements here. So that's how he first started, and I have grown as an artist along with him, in coloring with him. So Metamorphia, I don't really need to say much about it because I think a lot of people who have been coloring for some time would know something about it. Mythic World, I would say, is my favorite of his because each illustration is an illustration, things like or Metamorphia, the backgrounds were a lot more sparse and it was not necessarily a cohesive image. It was main object and that's it. There was nothing really within the background. Whereas in something like Mythic World, the images felt a lot more cohesive. It felt like Kirby Rosales was really coming into himself as an artist, where again, it's an illustration. It's not just a focal object and just an empty background. There were elements within the background that drew you into the image. Okay, so Dark Fairy Tales by Kirby Rosales as well. I just have a lot of loyalty to him at this point because I've been coloring with his books ever since his first books came out. And again, this really speaks to the cohesiveness of his art now, where you get these 2-page spreads where it's really an illustration. It's not one focal point, empty background, and that's it. I think he's really, really grown into a fantastic artist. This one I haven't touched just yet, but I'm sure you can find some flip throughs online. It's just stunning. I think fairy tales, for me, the appeal of them is that they are dark, yes, but there is a good balance. There's the dark and there's the light. There's elements of narcissism, of evil, of these various things, but it's offset. So I think maybe within my coloring I will show that, where Kirby Rosales has emphasized the dark elements and I within my color choices could emphasize the more sweet and loving and wholesome elements. I don't know, if possible. But I think the coloring books, these Coco Wyo, the very cozy kind of coloring books, tend to emphasize on the cutesy, sweet elements, the very tranquil elements of day-to-day life as well. So as you can see within my collection, and then Anamorphia as well, I don't really have to talk about very much because it's very, very well known, and it's been around for quite some time. I think my collection just shows that I'm very into nature-inspired imagery, definitely. You can see within mythographic as well fantastical elements, and you can see within the Game of Thrones as well some fantastical elements, grounded in some level of realism, some excitement about nature, for example in Circle of Life as well. And I do like the girl moments, these cute and comfy day-to-day life kind of scenes as well. I think that these are also stunning in their own way. But again, you can see I haven't bought a lot of Coco Wyo just yet. Some of them are calling to me, some of them are not. This felt detailed enough, but not too detailed to be bogged down. And then, yeah, I think this kind of gives you an idea of where I am as an artist. And tell me about yourself, tell me about your collection. If you want to comment in my comments to say, hey, I've also put up a video of my coloring book collection, I would just love to comment and support you on your artistic journey as well. So I just hope that you're having a wonderful creative day, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.